Have you ever met someone who felt almost too kind to be dangerous? Someone who smiled at the exact right moment, said exactly what you needed to hear, made you feel understood, protected, chosen, and yet somehow, every time you left them, a quiet part of you felt weaker. That is what makes dangerously sweet people so terrifying. They do not frighten you with cruelty, they frighten you with comfort. They do not force their way into your mind. They are invited in, and once they are there, they do not always use anger, threats, or violence. Sometimes they use warmth, patience, affection. They study your pain, mirror your values, and become whatever your heart is most likely to trust. That is the real horror. Some of the most destructive people do not look dark at all. They look safe. They look soft. They look like the last person in the world you should be afraid of. And by the time you realize sweetness can also be a weapon, the damage has usually already begun. Most people are taught to fear obvious danger. The liar who cannot keep his story straight, the narcissist who constantly needs attention, the manipulator who controls through intimidation. But real life is often far more unsettling than that. Some of the most psychologically dangerous people do not dominate the room. They calm it. They do not speak loudly. They listen carefully. They do not attack your boundaries at first. They respect them so beautifully that you begin to lower them on your own. They make you feel guilty for ever doubting them, and that is why they are so hard to detect. We expect danger to look sharp. We rarely expect it to look tender. The mind behind this kind of sweetness is not always evil in the dramatic way movies portray evil. Sometimes it is colder than that, more calculated, more adaptive. It understands something very deep about human beings. It understands that people do not open up because they are overpowered. They open up because they feel seen. They trust because they feel emotionally recognized. They surrender because they think they have finally found someone gentle enough not to hurt them. A dangerously sweet person knows this, and if they are manipulative, they use emotional accuracy the way a hacker uses a password. Think about how quickly affection can disarm suspicion. A person remembers a tiny detail about your childhood. They notice when your voice changes. They tell you that you deserve better. They praise your sensitivity. They admire your honesty. At first, this feels healing. It feels like intimacy. But sometimes it is not intimacy at all. Sometimes it is surveillance disguised as care. They are not just loving you. They are mapping you. They are learning where your self-doubt lives. They are noticing what makes you feel guilty, what makes you desperate to prove you are good, what makes you afraid of abandonment. And once they know those things, they do not need to control you directly. They can simply touch the right emotional nerve and let you control yourself. There was a woman who once described her partner in a way that stayed in people's minds for years. She said, "He never yelled. That was the problem. If he had yelled, I would have known something was wrong. Instead, he was endlessly calm. When she was upset, he smiled gently and told her she was tired. When she questioned him, he would softly ask why she seemed so distrustful lately. When she cried, he would hold her and whisper that he hated seeing her like this. He never called her crazy. He did something worse. He behaved so sweetly while quietly rewriting reality that she started calling herself crazy. That is the kind of mind we are talking about. Not chaotic, not explosive, surgical. What makes these people effective is that they understand one of the darkest truths about human behavior. People would rather doubt themselves than lose someone who feels emotionally precious to them. Let that sink in. When somebody becomes deeply important to you, your mind does not stay objective. It starts protecting the bond. It edits your perception, it minimizes red flags, it reinterprets patterns. You stop asking, "What are they doing to me?" and start asking, "What is wrong with me that I keep feeling hurt?" This is where dangerously sweet people thrive. They create emotional dependence first, then confusion second. And once those two are bonded together, the victim often becomes their own prison guard. Sweetness itself is not the problem. Real kindness is one of the most beautiful things in the world. But false sweetness has a very different texture. Real kindness gives you space. Manipulative sweetness pulls you in. Real kindness respects your pace. Manipulative sweetness accelerates intimacy. Real kindness does not panic when you say no. Manipulative sweetness becomes wounded by your boundaries. Real kindness leaves you feeling steadier in yourself. Manipulative sweetness leaves you feeling more emotionally entangled, more responsible, more confused. The difference is subtle in the beginning, but brutal in the end. A dangerously sweet person often creates a private emotional world where they seem uniquely safe. They become the person who gets you when nobody else does. They subtly separate you from competing sources of clarity. Not always by saying, "Leave your friends." They are smarter than that. Instead, they sigh when your friend questions them. They look hurt when your family notices inconsistencies. They act disappointed that others cannot see their good intentions. Soon you are defending them, then isolating yourself, then resenting anyone who tries to help you. The trap works best when it feels like love, loyalty, and protection rather than control. There was a young man who became close to a coworker everyone adored. She was charming, funny, deeply attentive. She checked in on him during stressful days, brought him coffee, remembered the names of his siblings, and told him he deserved more appreciation. Over time, he began confiding in her about everything. Then something changed. She would casually mention private things he had told her in front of others, but always in a playful tone. When he looked uncomfortable, she would apologize so sweetly that he felt guilty for being upset. She started framing herself as the only person who truly cared about him, while quietly creating conflict between him and the rest of the office. He did not notice the pattern until nearly every important relationship at work had become strained. By then, she had already positioned herself as his emotional rescuer. She wounded him and comforted him in the same cycle. That combination can become addictive. This is another terrifying piece of the psychology. The human nervous system can become bonded not only through pleasure, but through unpredictability. When someone is sweet, then subtly hurtful, then sweet again, the mind starts chasing resolution. You become hyper-focused. You replay conversations. You crave the return of the warmth. This is not because you are weak. It is because intermittent reward is powerful. It can trap even intelligent, self-aware people. The same mind that knows something is wrong can still become obsessed with getting back to the version of the person who once felt so safe. That is why people stay in dynamics they would warn others to run from. They are not attached only to the person. They are attached to the emotional promise. Dangerously sweet people are often masters of image management. In public, they appear generous, patient, mature. They know how to look good from a distance. They may even have genuine moments of care. That is what makes them even more confusing. Manipulative people are not always fake in every second. Sometimes they mean the nice things they say in the moment. Sometimes they really do feel tenderness. But if their deeper pattern is control, self-serving emotional strategy, or pleasure in power, those moments of sincerity do not make the pattern harmless. A knife can be polished and still cut. What they fear most is exposure, not because they feel guilt in the way you might expect, but because exposure breaks the spell. Once people compare notes, once patterns are named, once the target regains trust in their own perception, the sweet mask loses its force. That is why these individuals often work hard to keep every relationship separate. They want each person to experience a different version of them. To one person, they are wounded and fragile. To another, wise and composed. To another, endlessly supportive. They are not just managing emotions. They are managing narratives. And in the middle of all those narratives, the truth starts disappearing. One of the most chilling signs is how calmly they respond to pain they caused. A healthy person may become defensive, but they still show a certain emotional disruption when they realize they hurt someone. A dangerously sweet manipulator can remain eerily composed. They tilt their head. They lower their voice. They say, "I'm sorry you feel that way," or "That was never my intention," or "You know how much I care about you." Notice what is happening there. The focus shifts instantly from impact to image. They are not entering your pain, they are restoring their innocence. And because they do it gently, you may miss the fact that your reality was just quietly dismissed. This is why the most dangerous mind is not always the cruelest one. It is often the most emotionally literate one with the least moral restraint. That combination is devastating. Emotional intelligence without conscience can become psychological weaponry. They can read insecurities, detect loneliness, sense guilt, and identify unmet needs faster than most people. But instead of honoring that knowledge, they use it. They become exactly what the moment requires. Soft when softness works, vulnerable when vulnerability works, devoted when devotion works. And when none of that works, they may still never become openly hostile. They simply become colder, more distant, or more subtly punishing until you return to the shape they prefer. A therapist once described a client who kept saying, "But they're such a good person." That sentence was keeping her stuck, because what she meant was not that the person was good. What she meant was that the person knew how to produce goodness as an experience. They knew how to make her feel chosen after making her feel invisible. They knew how to cry at the right time. They knew how to say, "You're the only one who understands me," right after crossing a line. She was not in love with a stable truth. She was attached to a highly effective emotional performance. And the more pain she endured, the more valuable that performance seemed, because her mind wanted to believe all of it had meant something. This is where the deepest damage happens, not only in the heartbreak, but in the self-betrayal. After enough exposure to dangerously sweet people, you can start distrusting your own instincts.